Welcome to Sports CTO Talks. In this series, I would be connecting with industry leaders from technology and sports, where we will simplify sports technology. I am Ami, and I will talk through amazing mind of tech leaders who are shaping the future of sports. We will dive into discussions and innovations driving the industry, from AI to cloud, from cybersecurity to sustainability. If it is sports tech, we are talking about it. Today's guest, Andy Abramson, a true pioneer at the intersection of marketing, technology, and communication with over 4 decades of experience. Andy is the founder and CEO of Communicano, a globally recognized virtual marketing agency that has played a role in over 50 company exits and generating over more than 6 billion in value across sectors like fintech, telecom, media and AI. From advising industry giants like AT&T, Nokia, AOL to shaping the growth journeys of startups acquired by companies like Google, eBay and many more. And he has consistently been at the forefront of innovation and strategic storytelling. But what makes his journey more fascinating on today's podcast is his early start in sports marketing, which began back when he was 14 years old, and going to build the first fan development program, which led across multiple professional sports teams. We welcome you, Andy, to the podcast today.
Thanks, Amy. We're actually to keep score because stats are such an important part of sports. I learned at a very early age. We're up to 64 exits now and $9.5 billion in real money returned back to the investors, the executives, and of course, the employees. So it's great to be here because sports is really shifting from logo-driven
Yes.
exposure to data-driven ownership. And I've watched all this happen over my years in sports, dating back to when I was with the Philadelphia Wings and the Flyers and the Denver Nuggets, and then driving sports marketing for a brand called Upper Deck. And a lot has changed, but a lot hasn't changed. One of the things we always thought was that teams must control that fan identity through various data layers. You have to unify them. So today you have APIs and you have AI, and all that unlocks personalization. It drives more monetization and also ultimately creates long-term value for the franchises. That's what that's something we did very early on when I was at the Flyers. We created long-term value with what you referenced as that first fan development organization. And if you look at it today, the platforms own the value. The teams don't. And we'll be talking, I hope, a lot about that because the future from where we're sitting at Communicano Sports is the future really belongs to those organizations that are able to build infrastructure for you and build that infrastructure with the tooling, with the technology, and in turn, building it so they have more monetization capabilities of the audiences they build. Sports teams do a great job at building audience. They do a lousy job at owning it.
Correct. Agree with that part. So, for nearly 40 years, sponsorship was, value was measured in impressions, logos, reach, and broadcast visibility. Today, reports show, over 60 to 70% of digital fan interactions happen by owned team professionals. It can be into socials or OTTs. So, our teams essentially building audience they don't own. Is it dangerous or how would you put it?
I really think that the teams do this great job, as I said in the open, at building these massive audiences. But it's like building a house on rented land. You think of social media or think of over-the-top platforms. That's just distribution, but it's distribution on somebody else's network. So if you're distributing information socially over Instagram, Facebook, Meta owns that information. If you're doing a podcast over the top through Apple or Spotify, they own the primary data set of who the audience is. And those are distribution, not ownership. And a lot of times, sports organizations, because of their nascent knowledge of data and digital and technology, they mistake distribution for ownership. And that's something that you really have to think through, because do you own the relationship with the fan, or are you simply engaging with the fan? Engagement and ownership are different, just like distribution and ownership are different. Now, if you don't control that identity layer, you're not controlling the monetization layer. And that's not dangerous. It's really existential, because you're giving up the asset that you've cultivated.
Correct. Okay. So like when you talk like this, the global sports sponsorship market is still valued. Like, it is more than 100 billion. But still the engagement rates, on the traditional assets like static branding are declining.
Mhm.
So is the logo era dying, or, just being misunderstood, or like what is it?
As somebody who put logos on children when I was worth the Flyers, and put the on 5-year-olds, and then had them out on the ice, and we sold them. We literally sold the concept of putting a brand on a 5-year-old who was going to skate between periods. But that also led to the development of many programs, including other programs based on that. The era of a logo isn't dead. It's just been overexposed.
Okay.
The problem is that teams and brands sell and buy logos, but without data, that logo is nothing more than a sticker on the wall. It's wallpaper. Brands now want an outcome, and if you can't tie the exposure to the behavior of what's going on, you're basically selling overpriced inventory. It's like in the old days, we used to say a magazine ad in a program book is worthless if you're on the buying side. If you're on the selling side, we would throw that into the package to inflate the value of the package. Why? The program book never sold.
Okay. So like when you're talking like that, like, teams today often have less, like 20-30% first party data visibility on their fan base. So what does owning the fan, like as you were saying, that it is all like app, you're sharing or it on Apple, or you're sharing it on Spotify. So practically when you look at like that, how, like from a tech architecture standpoint of view, what is the first party data visibility? Like it can be CDPs, the identity graphs, how does that work?
Uh, I always think about identity graphs, social graphs, CDPs as meaning one unified identity layer that the team has on the fan. And the reason for that is very simple. One fan, one profile, all across everything, ticketing, event activities, content, commerce, your pass into the venue. Give me one identity. Think about it. Here in the US, we have one social security number. We don't have a social security number for each job we have. We don't have a social security number that we use for college when we do our college entrance forms. We have a social security number from the time we get one until the time we pass on. So think about it in the same terms. If we simply have one social security number, why are sports organizations having so many personalities surrounding the fan? The
Okay.
ticket personality, the purchase personality when they buy merchandise
Hmm.
online. If the person changes their email address from account to account, the team has no way of maintaining consistency and continuity with that fan.
Correct. So, like, there was a study by McKinsey. It suggests that companies are leveraging the first party data. Like, it can be into 2x or 3x higher and gaining 2x, 3x higher ROIs on marketing spend. So, why are so many sports organizations still lagging building unified fan data layers?
Oh, that one's so easy from where I sit because I've moved from the sports world into the digital streaming world in the late 90s, and about the same time is when we crossed over and we understood what the difference was. The difference is how a sports team or a sports league is wired. They're wired as for media, not for product. They sell inventory, not experiences. And data infrastructure requires that long-term 1,000-mile stare at looking over the mountain or looking around corners, not just season by season on a patchwork basis, but thinking generation. It's getting late for me here in California. But when you think about it, what we built in 1976, Ed Snyder, the owner of the Flyers, who hired us all, and really gave me a chance to do something at a very young age. We built a program to get kids playing hockey to make them fans. That meant their family became fans. That meant their family brought them to games. That means when they grew up, they started going to games and became season ticket holders. And that means their kids would start to play and they would go to games with their parents. Well, that's generational and that's cycling and that's putting things together in a long-term view of not for this week, not for this season, but for the strength of the organization. Because we did that from 1976 until Ed Snyder passed away, the Flyers were never not sold out in that era. I left them in 1988. They were still sold out well into the 2000s. So the 40,000 members of a database waiting to buy season tickets, that was constantly being built up. So by thinking long term versus short term, and thinking well beyond the season, but seasons after, you end up really looking at how you can build something with long-term thinking because you're thinking about the product you have, not media to fill.
Okay. So like when there is audience, like these days everything is about Instagram, YouTube, or like multiple platforms. So and even leagues heavily rely on these platforms for fan engagement. So who really owns the lifetime value of this fan today?
Well, if your engagement lives on Instagram or YouTube or TikTok, those platforms own the long-term value. Sure, the teams get attention, but the platforms get intelligence. You can guess who wins.
Correct. Okay. So there is modern digital business, like from Amazon to Stripe scale through APIs. So what would a Stripe like API layer look like for sports franchisees?
Well, everything we were just talking about earlier, a few questions back, tickets, merchandise, content, fan loyalty, fan identity. If you build on top of something that you control, partners then plug into it and your revenue multiplies without adding headcount. On the other hand, if you're giving it up to, say, Stripe, and you haven't built a common core API as a team, as a league, you're giving up revenue, you're giving up intelligence, and intelligence is long-term revenue value for you as a franchise, you as a team, you as a league, you as a player.
Okay. Okay. So like when we are seeing the rise of, sports as a platform, from ticketing, fantasy, betting, content creation. So like how do APIs unlock new monetization platforms? Like are there any layers between tickets and sponsorships? Or, how does that API thing work?
Well, API turns a team into a platform. And once you become a platform play, you can monetize everything from, say, a betting integration to a fantasy sports overlay to fan personalized commerce and content. You can deliver dynamic pricing, much like the airlines do. Tickets become just one entry point, not the entire business. Sort of like the music industry. 103% of a of revenue generated these days out for musicians and artists outstrips the royalty rate they get from, say, Spotify and Apple Music. We're talking the same thing, Amy. What we're talking about is changing the way teams can make even more money because now the conversations, the data, everything that's flowing through can be monetized. But you need to do that by taking advantage of APIs. It's one of the reasons why I built devlocker.dev, devlocker, period, DEV, which is a database of APIs and MCP servers, which is all about sports, arenas, streaming, ticketing, parking, directions. If it relates to a sports activity, whether it's stats alone, you can pull it from ESPN or the leagues. I even have cricket information in there about the T20 because I see cricket rising here in the United States and obviously being very popular around the world. So when you look at something like DevLocker with 180 some APIs and MCP servers, you realize that there's this big market to connect to. So having APIs as a team and knowing how to take advantage of them turns what you're doing as a team into a platform.
Okay. So like when you're talking about the developer, like, is the future CTO of a sports team closer to media CTO, like, or a SaaS platform CTO? And, like, how does that work?
Well, first, I don't think most teams actually have a CTO.
Exactly.
They have an IT guy whose job it is to connect things and hopefully make things work. The future CTO of a sports team, if they would hire him, is someone who thinks platform play, who thinks SaaS, who understands that media thinking is old school linear thinking, whereas platform thinking is exponential. A traditional CTO who thinks of things in a media format, they scale content. But if they think in terms of a platform, they scale an ecosystem. That's how I think about sports. And though I would never say I'm a CTO, I could be a CSO, a chief strategy officer, and come in and say to somebody, these are the things you need to do. If you've got a sports team, here's how you need to be thinking. If you've got a sports team and an arena and a farm system and a second venue and a practice facility, there's ways of tying all that together in a cloud-based SaaS system that makes everything work together and creates a unified experience for the fan, for the staff, for the players, for the broadcasters, for everyone. Oh, yes, and the advertisers, sponsors too.
Absolutely. So there is a study by Deloitte that over 70% of fans accept, personalized data, personalized digital experiences, but very few teams deliver true one-on-one engagement. So where is the biggest gap you see, like, back then and today, and how can those gaps be covered or fulfilled or, reduced?
Well, having been on all three sides of the equation, I've been on the sports team side, I've been on the brand side, and I've been on the agency side. The uniqueness that we saw when we were at Upper Deck was because of our agency experience, because of my team experience, we knew how to execute. Execution is one of the biggest gaps going today. If you don't know how to execute, you can't deliver modern day technology. In our case today, teams know that personalization matters, but they lack that approach to how you get clean data, real-time pipelines, and product discipline. So it's not really a strategy problem. The sports teams never really get up to the strategy layer. They live often at the tactical layer, but they think they're doing strategy. To me, it's an architectural problem inside the organization, from staffing to execution, by understanding how to shift from a tactical implementation of something to a strategic look at it, and then building out those strategies to enable those tactics to deliver you more long-term value, long-term fan experience, and long-term engagement with you.
Okay. Like from past few years or like few months, everyone is talking about AI. So if AI can tailor each fan experiences from different camera angles, commentary, offer like does it offer a fragmented shared solutions into live sports, or is it an experience, or how can a fan take it as a whole?
Well, AI doesn't fragment the experience. It's going to layer it. It's also the same argument of personalization versus privacy not being a trade-off, but being transparent. You give fans value, you explain the exchange, you let them control it, and trust becomes your data mode. And then you can have shared moments that stay between the team and the fan. The personalization wraps all around that. And then think broadcast plus augmentation. If I can give the fan a more personalized experience, like what TikTok is going to do with FIFA in the World Cup this year, with very personalized selections of what you can watch, you're giving that fan what they choose and what they need. And the old school approach is want satisfaction. Well, if you try sometimes, you just might find you get what you need, the old Rolling Stones line from the song. But what you're doing is you're giving somebody an experience that's augmented well beyond what they have today. And the big thing is stepping outside the box and not just selling the same old idea, but being willing to sell something new.
Okay. And when we look from the right holders perspective, traditional sponsorship ROIs was based on eyeballs. Today brands are demanding measurable engagement, conversions, and data access. So how should right holders restructure their sponsorship packages in first world data first world, sorry?
Well, budgets are moving. You have to realize that budgets are moving, and the way people approach sponsorship is changing. Even what I did when I was with Upper Deck, or when I was selling sponsorship with the Nuggets or the Flyers, sponsorships need to be rebuilt around data access and predictable outcomes. Brands want predictability. They want outcomes that are favorable. So they should be buying segments, not the entire enchilada. They should be looking at fan behavior and conversions, not simply signage. Signage is signage, but where budgets are moving is around data and what that data can deliver. So when you're a brand, you need to be buying things that are more up your alley. At Upper Deck, we had the 10 commandments of what we would buy. And rule number one was buy what you need. Rule number two was refer to rule number one. Rule number three was never worry about the competition buying what you don't want. Rule number four was let the competition buy. Rule number five, bake in our product into every sponsorship. Because if we could bake our product in, we could create new product, we could sell more product, we can make more money. That's why we went from $27 million a year to $297 million a year on revenue on my watch. And granted, I had a $36 million sports marketing budget to play with, but we made every dollar work. So you have to look at sponsorships being rebuilt for the digital era. You can't be applying linear approaches to data and AI.
When you're talking about the digital era, like with your more than 4 decades of experience, how has the marketing shifted into sports and sports technology? Like back then, what was it into marketing, and what brands are focusing right now today?
Well, the first thing is you got to go in looking at long-term value. If you don't go into long-term value, you're never going to reach it, which means having a full stack thinking to how you're approaching your sponsorship and your engagement. That means identity and resolution, behavioral analytics, AI modeling, activation channels. Without a closed loop measurement system, your long-term value of the fan, that's a guess. We used to call that a reach. When you talk about brands that really understand what they're doing. I talked about how we put product at the center of our sponsorship approach, which is the way I've built marketing campaigns for companies like Nokia, AT&T, AOL, a bunch of startups that have all been acquired. Well, we look at Netflix or Spotify. They've got incredible product iteration. They understand data looping. That's something sports can't replicate because they don't try to control the entire experience because you can't. You can't control the outcome on the playing surface, but you can get closer than they are today by everything you do around the game and everything you do around the broadcast, everything you do around the stream. All of that you can control as a sports team, league, or rights holder. And when you do that, you get the ability to iterate faster and give the fan the product that they want. You also get to build more around the data, and that data keeps evolving, and you keep learning, you keep zeroing in and getting smaller and smaller to where you're pin casting to the audience.
Okay. And like when we talk about marketing, fan lifetime value, the LTV is becoming a key metric. So some estimates suggest that highly engaged fans can be worth 5 to 10x more over time. So what tech stacks is required to actually measure and grow LTV effectively?
I think the very first thing is knowing who your fan is. So that's all about building identity and being able to capture it inside a modern day CRM that gives you deeper data around them. The second thing is understand the fan. That get into behavioral analytics. Are they going to every game? Are they only going to some games? Are they buying hot dogs and beer, or are they buying pizza and soft drinks, or are they buying more expensive food? Do they pay to park? Do they buy merchandise? Do they come with a family member or a business colleague? Are they giving their tickets away? Understand the behavioral analytics and then model using AI to figure out what it's going to take to drive them through activation channels. You put all that together in a closed loop environment, and you're able to get a much more finite LTV versus what you have today, which is a guess.
Okay. So in the next, this is the last question, Andy, in the segment, is like in the
Okay.
next 3 to 5 years, do you see a world where most valuable asset in sports is not a media rights or teams, but structured fan data? And who wins in that scenario? Teams, leagues, or tech platforms?
Well, if I'm looking over the horizon 3 to 5 years from now, Amy, the fan data is going to rival media rights in value, hands down, because now you've put data at the center of the business model. So the winners are whoever owns the identity layer and the APIs. This could be the team, the league, or the platform that sits all between it. But you have to own all that to make sense of it.
Okay. And Andy, sorry, one more question. It is a very important question. Like, with your decades of experience, what would you suggest, like 2 or 3 takeaways for the podcast guest? That takeaways that this is an essential, this is a must, and you need to do these things today.
Check out devlocker.dev because that's going to give you a lot of insight about the where you can go and what you can do with data. Second thing is don't always look at things through the lens of the team or the lens of the fan, but look at it through the lens of what data can deliver to both. And then the third thing is find a way to get involved in sports, but don't just go as a fan. Find a way to be part of the business of sports because it's so much fun.
Perfect. We'll move on to the next segment. That's the rapid fire round. I'll ask you a few questions and you'll have to be quick in answering. It can be one word or
Okay,
one
fire away.
sentence. Perfect. Who is your all-time favorite? Which is your all-time favorite stadium?
The building right behind me, which was the Spectrum that I grew up working in.
I
It
knew the
was pure
answer.
energy.
If you have to have dinner with your favorite athlete, where would it be and with whom?
Actually, athletes don't impress me. I'd rather have dinner with Mark Walter, who started the Professional Women's Hockey League and is the owner of the Los Angeles Dodgers. I think he's doing some really innovative things in the sports business. And if I had to sit down at a steakhouse and have dinner, no cameras, just a conversation, I'd rather talk to him than some athlete.
Perfect. One word, data or instinct?
Say that again, please.
Select one, data or instinct?
Data,
AI in sports, overrated or underrated?
underrated and underused.
One app you think understands fans best, Spotify or Netflix?
Netflix,
Would you rather have 1 million anonymous fans or 100,000 fully known fans?
100,000 fully known every time. It's not how many, it's who.
Correct. APIs, backbone of the future or just tech jargon?
Backbone.
Personalization or mass fandom? What wins?
Uh, Personalization wins every time.
Absolutely. We'll move on to the next segment. That's you'll have to answer just one question into 30 seconds. What role does AI play in leveraging fan data and APIs to shift sports organizations away from the traditional logo driven model towards a data owned asset driven future?
Well, you have to look at AI as the engine that turns fans' data into action and APIs into scale. It's going to predict the layers of behavior, personalize the experience, and automate, most importantly, monetization. This shift is really simple. From selling visibility to owning the relationships, the teams that win will treat data as an asset, not as exhaust fumes.
Perfect. Thank you, Andy, for sharing wonderful insights and joining us today on the podcast.
Amy, my pleasure. And anybody wants to reach me can always find me at CEO at Communicana with 1M.com.
Absolutely. So, everyone, let's stay connected for more understanding on sports and technology in the future. Please share this episode with all the people who love sports and technology. We will meet in the next episode next week. Until then, stay curious, stay inspired, and keep exploring.